Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm audible to you. Sorry, I could not able to. Yes.
Yes, audible.
Sorry, I could not able to log in time because there was a power off. Just now the power came, so I logged it. Okay, we'll start the session. We'll start the session now. So before that, I'll just quickly recap what we discussed in yesterday's session. So what was the topic we discussed in yesterday? Yes, what was the topic we discussed yesterday? Did you remember anyone? So yesterday we discussed about what is Linux. Linux is an open source operating system. So yesterday what we have discussed, Linux. What is Linux? Linux is an open source operating system. Open source means the source code of the Linux operating system is freely available over the internet, which anybody can access and modify. So which cannot be done in other OS. So the thing which separates the Linux from other operating system is that it is an open source. The source code of the Linux kernel, which is designed by Linus Torvald, is freely available over the internet, which anybody can access and modify. So because of that, Linux is called as open source operating system. So different vendors are there. You can call them as a distributor also. So we have different flavors in Linux because the Linux is an open source operating system. So out of that, we are going to discuss about the Red Hat, because most of the servers in the world, they are working on the Red Hat. So before we proceed with the flavor of the Linux, we should be aware that most of the companies, they prefer to use what? Linux. So why they are using the Linux on their servers? Like most of the clients prefer to use Windows because it is easy to operate. It is having graphical interface. But most of the servers in the world are working on Linux. So there might be some reason, yes? So we need to know that reason why the Linux has been preferred on the servers by many companies. So first of all, Linux is secured. First of all, the Linux is secured because of its structure. So Linux is secure because of its structure. So now we will be discussing today how the Linux is secure compared to the other operating system, including Windows. Okay, so shall I proceed? So first we have to see the structure of the Linux operating system. So yesterday I went through the what are the topics which we are going to discuss through our course Linux operating system. So now today we'll see why. No, here I told you no, we will be not discussing the shell scripting in this course. So most of the people who are discussing the shell scripting, they'll tell Linux only, structure also, only 2-3 scripts which they'll show you. Okay. Okay, so now you can see here why the Linux has been preferred on the server side because of its structure. So generally, if you see the overall structure of the Linux operating system, so the Linux operating system, which is a collection of program, this program is divided into two parts. So the main program of the Linux operating system is the Linux kernel. So the complete Linux operating system program is divided into two parts. What it is? Linux kernel and shell. So here as a user, if I am sitting here, so if I want to use the Linux operating system, so I want to open anything or apply some command, I need to open what? Shell. I need to open what? Shell. So in Windows, we need to open what? Terminal. Here we need to open what? The shell. So the main program of the Linux operating system is what? The Linux kernel. And the other part of the Linux program, a Linux operating system, is shell. So as a user, we'll be sitting here and we will be using this machine. So now, why the Linux is secured means in the Windows you don't have any shell. You don't have any shell. So if any program is there, if any program is there in the Windows, that program, if you just run, it will run it. So whether that program might contain the virus also, it does not able to understand. So that program will be run. But here, the first security layer is what? Shell. So which is not present in the present in the Windows. So what the shell will do here? So shell is a interface between the user and the kernel. So shell work is what? It is a command checker. So suppose I'm using any Linux operating system. So in the Linux operating system, we have predefined command, which is given by the vendor by writing the program. They'll write some command, like to create a user. We have a command called user add. To check the content, we have a command ls. So that is called predefined command, which is developed by the vendor. So suppose one file is being sent to you by some unknown source, and you are trying to execute that file. Are you trying to run that command, run some command? So the command will go to where? The shell. So the shell will check whether that command is there as a predefined command, it is there in the operating system or not. So that's why it is called command checker. So most of the shells are being developed using the C language. So shell, what it will do first, once the command comes to us, somebody is executing the command, it will check whether the command is predefined it or not. Then after that, it is checked that command is executing by whom, super user or normal user. So now suppose you are given some file is there, some virus is there, somebody sent to you. In Windows, that program will run automatically. Once you run the file, it will run and the virus will attack. But here, if some unknown file is there, so the file will not have in Linux any execute permission. And if you are giving any command, the command checker will check whether that command is proper or not. Whether that command is proper or not, it will check. Who will check this? The shell will check. So if that command is found in the predefined, then only it will accept. So what are the the shell will do first of all? So once, if you want to give any command in Windows, we have to open the command prompt. Whereas in Linux, we need to open the shell. So what is the default shell which we are using in Linux? The program name or the shell name is /bin/bash. So what is the shell will do? It is an interface between the user and the kernel. So as a user, I'm sitting here. So I want to use one command. So the command will be executed by the kernel with the help of the machine. So it is an interface between the user and the kernel. So what the shell will do? It will check that command is proper or not. It is predefined command or not. It is given in the operating system or not. And second thing it will do, this command is executed by whom? Super user or normal user. So now what happens? Now what happens? The shell act as a go between. So it will see whether that command is given by the administrator or the normal user. Here the administrator name is what? Root in Linux. So before accepting, it will check all this. After it is found proper, then what it will do? It will translate that language. Once it found the command acceptable to it, it is predefined and it is given by the proper user. Then it will translate that command which is given in the high level language into the binary language, because machine they never understand high level language. So this is the role of the shell, which is the first layer of the Linux operating system. Are you following me? The importance of this? Are you following? If you are not getting anything, please write it in the chat box. If you are following, you can say yes or something like that, so that I can proceed to the next point. If you want me to repeat the point, same thing, I can repeat it. So did you understood the importance of shell? So yesterday we discussed that operating system is what? It's a collection of program. So Linux is in which type of operating system? Open source operating system. So Linux open source operating system program is consist of the Linux operating system program is divided into two parts, or it consists of shell and the shell and the kernel. So the first program of the Linux operating system is a shell. So why Linux is secured? Why it is being used in the servers? So in the Windows operating system program, if you check, there is no shell. The only Windows kernel will be there. So if any command is there, it can run. But here, first of all, the command will be proper or not, and who is giving that. All these things will be checked by the yes. So if suppose you have given some command and it is that command is not found, so you will get a message, command not found. So it will show you command not found. So that will not be executed. Are you following that? What is the role of that? If that command is proper, then what it will do? It will not execute the task. It will convert that into the binary language and it's sent to the kernel. Now the task will come to the kernel. Now the kernel, which is the main program or the main part of the Linux operating system. Now what the kernel will do? Kernel is the interface between the shell and the hardware. So machine consists of what? Hardware and the software. So here you can say this is your application, means software. And here the shell is there. Here Linux kernel is there. Inside that you will have the hardware. So now the Linux kernel is the interface between the hardware and the shell. So Linux kernel is the interface between the shell and the hardware. So Linux kernel is called the core. You can say core or the brain, or you can use the word heart of the Linux operating system. So now the command which is being translated into the binary language by the shell, now it will come to the kernel. So the kernel is something like a brain of the Linux operating system. Like in our body, whatever task. So you can say shell is work for validation purpose. Yes, you can say. Thus, you can say that. Then after that, what it will do? Now, what it will do? Now it will decide, like in our body, what the brain will does, which particular task should be done by which particular task should be done by which particular organ. Suppose you are doing one particular task. So in our body, we have different parts. So which particular part should do which work? Who will decide and who will control and who will manage all these things? Brain. So same way, in the machine, we have different hardware, different software. Machine consists of, computer consists of hardware and the software. So once the command is given by the user, whether that command is proper or not, it will be checked by the shell. And if it is proper, it will convert that into binary. It will now then it will come to the kernel. Now the kernel will decide this particular task should be done by which particular hardware or which particular software. So the kernel is something like a brain of the Linux operating system. So it is something like a brain, or you can say bridge, sorry, which acts like a bridge between the user and the various resources which the system, means computer, provide. So now it will control. What is the main function of the Linux kernel? It control all the tasks. So who should do what task will be decided, control and managed by kernel. Same like in our body, all our activities is controlled by our brain. So same way in the Linux kernel will control and manages all the tasks with the help of the machine. So the shell is the security layer in the Linux. So whenever unknown commands come or unknown file come, it will never run. So in Windows, what happens? You'll have only Linux kernel. Oh, sorry, Windows kernel will be there, no shell. So suppose if somebody send you the virus file, so it will not check whether it is virus is there or not. So by default in Windows, all the files will have executable permission. All the file will have execute permission. So if you just click on that, the file will get run and the virus will enter. But in Linux, there is no extension to the file. And in the Linux, the file will be not have execute permission by default. After you check, you can give the execute permission and run, but by default there is no execute permission in Linux. Whereas in Windows, all the files will have execute permission. So in Windows, for every file you will have some extension, like for executable file .exe, for text file .txt, for database file .dat, for mp3 file .mp3, for batch file .bat. But in Linux, we don't have any extensions. So in Linux, the files are being identified. Which type of file? It will be understand by what? Some alphabet, some characters will be there. So here, there will be no extension. So here, the file will be identified with the help of what? Some characters. So here the characters and alphabets will be there, symbols will be there, by which the file will be identified. So here the file is identified by symbol and alphabet. Like if it is a normal file, your first character, when we start the practical after installing the OS, we can see this. I'm just giving you the overview. So here the file will not have the extension in Linux. So how we will identify the file here? So we will have identified with symbols and alphabets. Like for the normal file, what will be the symbol here? Hyphen. For hidden file, dot. For block file, the alphabet will be B. For linked file, like we will be discussing, soft link, hard link, it will be L. For socket file, S will be there. So if it is a directory, which we can call as a folder also, first character will be D. For pipe file, you will have P. For character special file, you will have C. So here, the file will be identified with the alphabets and characters. So either you will have symbol or alphabet for different types of file. Whereas in Linux, you will have the extension. In Linux, you don't have the extension. So here the files are identified with either symbols or alphabet. Whereas in Windows, the files are identified with the extension. So first thing. And second thing, in the Windows, all the files have execute permission. But in Linux, all the files will be there without execute permission. So that file will not be run. And when you are working with the text mode, virus cannot enter in the Linux. So this is the reason your Linux is more secure. So apart from that, the Linux installation can be done on multiple partition. Whereas in the Linux, we can install the OS on multiple partition. Whereas in Windows, the OS can be installed only in single partition. So in Windows, if one of the OS folder get corrupted, entire OS will get corrupted. But in Windows, whenever we install the OS, it get installed only in a single drive. So in Windows, if one of the OS folder get corrupted, entire OS will get corrupted, or the entire OS will get collapsed. But in Linux, that problem will not happen, because Linux OS will be installed on multiple partition, which we'll discuss tomorrow, how to install the Linux OS on multiple partition. So when we install the Linux OS on multiple partition, if any one of the OS folder get corrupted, it will affect only one particular partition where that folder belong, without affecting the entire OS. Along with that, in Windows you have only firewall as a security inbuilt, but in Linux you have inbuilt security in the form of, along with the firewall, you have IP table SC Linux, which makes Linux more secure and more, you can say, stable OS. That is the reason most of the servers in the world are working on Linux. And Linux is your foundation course for any higher courses, like if you go for AWS, DevOps, VMware admin, Oracle database, Hadoop, SAP. So that's why this course is very, very, you can say, important for the people who are looking for the carriers uh, at the cloud side also. Okay. So here you can see, I repeat once again, why the Linux is more secure. Why the Linux is more secure? First of all, about its structure. So in the Linux, you have a shell which is not there in the Windows. First thing, because of its structure. Second thing, in the Windows, the files will be having execute permission. So anybody can run that file. But in Linux, the files are created without execute permission. So if any virus file is there, it will never run. First the shell will check, and after that there is no execute permission. And here the files are being identified with the symbols and alphabets. Apart from that, the Linux OS can be installed on multiple partition, which we cannot do in Windows. So because of these fundamental things and important factors, the Linux OS is more secure and stable compared to the other OS. That is the reason now most of the companies they are using what? Linux as their operating system in their servers, and most of the servers are working on the Linux platform. So whether I'm clear to everybody, whether I'm clear to everyone about what is the important advantage of using the Linux operating system for security and stability. So if you have any question or if any doubt, please ask me. I can clarify that. Yes, up to now it is clear, or any doubt anybody? So yesterday, I think, Das, you were there. Yesterday, I told you Linux has been designed using the Unix. So I told you that the difference yesterday. You can go through the yesterday video recording also. I'll give just overview of that. So Linux is a command. Linux is a OS which is designed from the Unix, same like Windows designed from DOS. Okay. So I'm just giving you the overview once again. So the Linux is a platform independent OS. It can be installed on any OS, same like Windows. Whereas the Unix was proprietary based operating system. You can say Unix is a proprietary based operating system, which is designed by the AT&T. So to install the Unix, you required specific hardware. Like in Unix, Solaris is there. Solaris can be installed only on Sun machine. IBM developed AIX Unix operating system, which can be installed on only on IBM machine. HP developed HP UX, so which can be installed on HP machine. But like Windows, Linux can be installed on any machine, whether you have Dell, HP, Lenovo, any laptop. So it is called platform independence. Okay, did you got the basic difference? Okay. So now up to now, whatever we have discussed today, it is clear to everyone? Or if any doubt is there, please ask. Monica, Nitish, Prashant, Devishis, oh sorry, Das, anybody, if you have any question, please ask. Abhay, yes, Kumar, any doubt? Some commands, some commands will be same. Some commands will be same in Windows and Unix because the structure is same. Like in the Windows and the DOS, the command, some commands will be same. But now nobody is using the Unix because for that you require specific hardware. If you want to change the OS, again you have to change the hardware. So better, that's why everybody is using what? Linux. Is it clear? Okay. So now, okay. So can I go to the next point then? If you are clear up to this, can I go to the next point? Okay. So now we will see this is the structure of the Linux OS. So this is the structure of the Linux OS. Now, before we start using the Linux OS, we should know the file system structure of the Linux also. This is the structure of the Linux. So the Linux operating system, which is a collection of programs logically divided into two parts, shell and the kernel. So same way, when we install the Linux OS, where exactly what data will be stored. So we should know that. Then we can able to operate the Linux operating system. So most of us are familiar with where exactly what data will be stored in Windows. So suppose I'll start with the Windows. So let me just connect my writing pad. 1 minute. Just 1 minute. So suppose we are more familiar with the Windows operating system. Yes. So in Windows, we are aware where exactly what data will be stored, so that it will be easier for to understand uh, that operating system, how it will work, or where exactly what data will be stored. So let me first go with the Windows. Suppose this is the machine. In this machine, you have installed Windows OS. So when we install the Windows OS, the Windows OS will get installed only in one drive. So where it will get installed? Windows OS on the C drive. So when we install the Windows OS on our machine, where Windows OS will get installed? On the C drive. So the C drive consists of many folders. So some of the important folders we will discuss. So one of the important folder in Windows is, there is a folder called Windows under the C drive. So this Windows folder contains subfolders like System32, drivers, log files. Yes. So these are the some of the important folder in Windows. So same way you have one more important folder in Windows, which is called program file. There is one more folder which is called program files. So what the program file will contain? It contain all installed application. So whenever we install any application, where exactly this application will be stored in Windows? .exe application will be stored in program file. So similar to that, in Windows, there is a folder called users. There is a folder called users. So in that user folder, there is a one separate folder called administrator. So here there is will be one folder called administrator. So administrator folder contain what? Subfolder. It contain what? Administrator created data. So administrator created data will be stored where? Under the user folder, C drive, users folder, administrator. Suppose I have one user U1. So for U1 user, one folder will be created. So U1 data will be here in a separate folder. Now suppose there is user 2. So user 2 data will be here. So for each and every user, one subfolder will be created with their name. So that user data will be stored in the user folder with their name. So this is the overall structure of the Windows OS. So in this, the problem is, suppose this user was logged in and this user got corrupted with some virus effect. So it will affect this folder, which will turn in affect this folder, which will turn in affect this. So the complete OS will get corrupted. So Windows advantage is what? It is easy to operate, but disadvantage is, since this OS is installed on a single partition, if one of the OS folder get corrupted, it will affect the entire OS. So everything will get what? Corrupted. So this is the problem in the Windows operating system. So because of this problem, most of the companies prefer to use what? Linux as their server, because this problem will not be there in the Linux. So Linux is having the structure wise very good security. Okay. So first of all, we have discussed in Windows there is no command checker. So all commands will be run, but in Linux, first the shell is there, first to security as per the structure. Then when we are installing the OS, here everything is there in a single partition, but in the Linux we can install our OS on multiple partition. So that we will see tomorrow. So before we go for the installation, we should know in Linux where exactly what data will be stored. Okay. So now you have to remember first point, in Windows, the OS will get installed where? On the C drive. But in Linux, when we install the Linux OS, in Linux, there will be no drive letter concept. There is no drive. So mostly the people will ask in which drive the Linux will get installed. So you have to remember in Linux, the drive letter concept is not there. So in Linux, when we install the OS will get installed where? The OS will get installed where? The OS will get installed on the directory. Which directory? Anybody have any idea? Where if I install Linux OS, where it will get installed? Any idea? Anybody? Okay, so let me just show you the structure now, structure of the Linux. Now suppose this is my machine. This is my machine. In this machine, I have installed a Linux operating system instead of Windows. So now the Linux operating system get installed where? In Windows, the OS will get installed on C drive. But what about the Linux? In Linux, where exactly the Linux OS will get installed? On the directory. In Linux, there is no drive letter. So the OS here will get installed on the directory. Which directory? Slash. So now you can say in Linux, slash is a directory which you can compare to the, now you can compare this directory to the C drive. So it is equivalent to the C drive. So here slash is there. Inside the slash there will be many subdirectories. There is only one main directory and there will be many subdirectories, like important subdirectories. So these are these subdirectories. So how to read the name? Slash root is one of the subdirectory. Slash home is one of the subdirectory. Yes, slash home. I'm just writing the important subdirectory. Slash home is the, so before the directory name, what will come? Slash. So you should not say this as a bin slash home, then slash boot, because these are the subdirectory of slash. Slash yes bin, slash bin, slash yes bin. So these are all subdirectories. Slash bin, slash etc. So these are the subdirectory of the slash. Slash etc. Sorry, already etc is written. Slash usr. This is usr. Slash media, like this. Many subdirectories will be there. So where the Linux OS will be there? The Linux OS will be there on slash directory. So this is called slash directory. This is called slash directory. Slash directory. This is also called as slash directory. This is called root, top level directory or root directory. So the people will be confused in the Linux. So if you don't want the confusion, you have to be very clear about these three things. So slash is called here, it is a directory. So it is called root directory. So if you understand three things, you can understand the structure of the Linux. So slash is a directory. Slash root is a subdirectory. So slash root is a subdirectory where root user data will be stored. Then what is root here? Root is a user. So you have to be clear which user. This is a super user. Super user you can call as an administrator. So what is the name of the administrator in Linux? Root. That name you cannot change. So root created data will be stored where? Slash root, which is a subdirectory. So slash root contain root user created data. So in Windows, the administrator name is what? Administrator. So administrator user created data will be stored where? In the user folder administrator. So here the slash root is the home directory of the root user. So whenever root user login, whenever the root user login, root user created files and directory will be stored where? Slash root. Then slash home is the home directory for all users. So here U1, I created U1, U2, rest of the user separate home directory. So U1, U2, U3, these are all users. So users home directory, all users home directory except root, rest of the user home directory slash home. So slash home, this is slash home, remember, this is slash home. So slash home is the home directory of all users, all user home directory slash home. So all the users data in Linux will be stored where? In slash home. All the users data will be stored where? In slash home. So now in Linux, what we will do? We will create a separate partition while installing the OS. We'll create one separate partition for slash home. We'll create the separate partition for slash boot, because these directories are important. So if any one of the user folder get affected with virus, first of all, if they are working in command mode, the virus will never get affected. Due to any reason, one of the user folder got corrupted. So which folder will get affected? Only /home, without affecting the OS, because the Linux OS, where it will be present, /contain Linux OS in the form of this subfolder. So in Windows, everything will be there in a single drive. Everything will be there in a single drive. So if one of the OS folder get corrupted, entire OS will get corrupted. But when we install the Linux OS, whichever folders are important, we will create separate folder for separate partition for separate folder in Linux while doing the installation. So Linux installation can be done on multiple partition. How to do that? We'll see that tomorrow. Linux installation. So before that, we should know what is /root, what is /home. So the most important directory in Linux is /, which contain the Linux operating system. So you can say this is similar to C drive. Then this is similar to administrator folder in Windows. This is similar to users folder. Now, the most important part of the Linux operating system is what? Linux kernel. So the Linux kernel will be stored where? Linux kernel will be stored where? In the /boot directory. So we will create one separate partition while doing the installation for /boot, so that our Linux kernel remains safe. So the most important part of the Linux operating system is Linux kernel, which will be stored in /boot. So /boot contain Linux kernel along with bootloader, which is called technically grub. Grub full form, Grand Unified Bootloader. What is the full form of grub? Grand Unified Bootloader. So what is the role of this? So whenever we install any OS, where it will be stored on the hard disk. So when you switch on the machine, what happens? The OS has to be loaded from the hard disk to the RAM. That process is called booting process. So we will be discussing one complete day, one session about the booting process. Because when you go for the interview, this is the definite and patent question. In every interview, they'll ask you booting process. So in the Linux, who will do the booting process, or through which directory the booting process will be done? So the booting process here will be done with the help of the /boot directory. So /boot directory contain Linux kernel. /boot directory contain Linux kernel. Along with that, it also contain bootloader, which is called grub. So what is the full form of grub? It is called Grand. GR means Grand Unified Bootloader. Simply you can call that as a bootloader also. So the grub, so in the /boot directory, it contains Linux kernel, bootloader, and bootable file. Bootable files. So the bootable file name is what? init.rd. So this is your bootable file. So whenever we install any Linux kernel and when we switch on the machine, here the booting process means loading of the OS will take place through which directory? /boot directory. So first the grub means bootloader will start the booting process, and the booting process is being done by the Linux kernel through bootable file. So this complete thing we will discuss in one complete session, 1 hour. We'll discuss about this in our coming day session, booting process. So today just remember the /boot directory is very important. All directories are important, but /boot directory is very important. So because if this directory get failed, yes, Das, I'll come to your question. Shell is in which directory? I'll tell you that. So now, /boot directory is the most important directory after /, because / contain Linux OS. The most important part of the Linux operating system is Linux kernel. So if the /boot directory get corrupted, you will have the OS, but the booting process will not take place. So you will get the screen, black screen. That error is called. So once the /boot get corrupted, and when you switch on the machine, the screen will appear like this. The screen will appear black, and on the monitor it will be written on the top side grub greater than. It means your boot directory got corrupted. So when the boot directory get corrupted, you cannot log in with any OS. The OS will be there, but you cannot log in. with the machine because the OS will not get loaded. So this error is called grub error. So grub error will appear when the boot directory is not working. So when the boot directory is not working means the OS will not get loaded. The OS will not get loaded from the hard disk because the OS will be there in the hard disk. So hard disk is called secondary memory. So whenever we switch on the machine, the OS will be get loaded from hard disk to RAM. Primary memory is RAM. Then we will get the login screen when we can log in with the user and we can able to use that machine. But if the boot directory get corrupted, what happens? If the boot directory get corrupted, what happens? The OS will not able to get loaded. The OS will be there in the hard disk, but the OS will not get loaded because booting process will not take place. So you will get a error, grub error. So you cannot log in. You will not get the login screen. So you will not able to log in. So then what is the solution for that? You have to take one bootable pen drive, insert the bootable pen drive, then go to the rescue mode. In Windows you have safe mode. Here it is rescue mode. The naming, that terminology is different, but the concept will be same. So we need to go to the rescue mode here and reinstall only the grub folder only. Sorry, reinstall just to boot directory. No need of installing entire OS. So go to the insert the bootable pen drive, go to the rescue mode and just reinstall the /boot directory. If you are getting that error, no need of entire OS. So this folder is very important. So while doing the installation, we'll create one partition. For /boot, so that separate partition will be there. This folder remains safe. So all the users data is important. So we'll create separate partition for OS installation. So we'll create one separate partition. So we'll create one partition for /, one partition for /boot, one partition for /home. So minimum 3 to 4 partition we'll create so that our OS remains safe and secure, which you cannot do in Windows. So this is the reason most of the servers are working on Linux. So now I'll go through are you understanding? Yes, please tell me. Are you understanding? If you are not getting any point, please you write it in the chat box. I can repeat once again. Okay, fine. So now the overall structure of the Linux will be something like this. So now this is the structure of the Linux OS. Inside this, how the data will be stored? So here the data will be stored how? So the data, exactly which data will be stored where? So that we can understand with the Linux directory structure. So in Linux, remember, there is no drive letter. Here everything will be based on directory. So this is the overall structure of the Linux OS. So this is the overall structure of the Linux. So where exactly what data will be stored? So first of all, our data will be there on /. So under the /, you will have many subdirectories like /bin, /boot, /root, /dev, /sbin, /etc, /home, /system, /lib, temporary media, USR. So these are the things which will be present. Inside this, these are the subdirectories of /. Inside this subdirectory, there will be again subfolders. Okay, so we will discuss this all of them in. So this is the overall structure of the Linux. Okay, so remember this. So first directory is /. Next directory is what? /home. So now here, the overall structure of the Linux operating system. So first, you will be having here what? Slash. So inside the slash, this is called root directory. This is a directory, remember. So please be clear about these three things. You should know when somebody says here root, when we say only root, then it means they are talking about the administrator. So what is the name of the administrator in Linux? Root. When they say only slash, then you should say this as a slash means root directory. So slash root is the subdirectory where the user's root user data will be stored. So this is the overall structure of the Linux operating system. So here you will not find any. So this file I'll be sending to you. Once I get the list of the people who have joined for the course, I'll be sending you this file. Along with this file, I have made one more file. In that, all the practical steps from first day to last day, all will be there in the form of a notepad file, so that you can do this practical very easily like this. Everything I have written with heading. So this complete file, along with this complete data, whatever I have collected the notes, I'll be sending you, so that you don't have to write anything. Okay. So please be clear about this. I'm repeating many times. Whenever we use the word slash, it is a directory. So it is called root directory. When we use the word in Linux only slash, it is a root directory. When we say root, when we are using the word only root, you need to automatically understand that we are talking about the user. Which user? Whenever we say root, if we are not saying anything, just root means we have to understand that we are talking about the administrator. So the name of the administrator in Linux is root. So when we install the Linux OS, where it will get installed means you have to say slash. So what is slash means? You have to say directory. What is the name of that? You can say that as a top level directory, or you can say root directory. Are you understanding, or I need to explain once more? Yes. Are you understanding, everyone? Is it clear, or shall I need to explain once more? Please tell me. Write it something. Shall I explain once more, or I will explain you each and every directory. I'm just telling you about, you have to be clear about three things. When somebody use the word root, what you will understand? You have to understand that it is a user. Which user? So the name of the administrator in Linux is, root. Okay, now I'll tell you about the each and every directory. So here, whenever we install the Linux OS, where the Linux OS will get stored, it will get stored where? So in Linux, there is no drive letter. Everything will get installed on the directory. So which is the main directory here? The Linux OS will be present on the slash, which is called top level directory or root directory. No, slash root is not the main directory. The main directory is slash. So the name of that slash is only root directory. But who is root? Root is the name of the administrator. So where the Linux OS will get installed? On slash. So what is slash is called? Slash is called root directory. Here you can see. But when we say only root, who is root? When somebody use the word root in a small letter, root is a user. Which user? When somebody use this word root is a user. Which user here? Administrator. The name of the root is nothing but, when we use the word root means, you have to understand, root is nothing but administrator. So what is the name of the administrator in Linux? In Linux, the administrator root is called, in Linux and Unix, the administrator name is Administrator name is root. You have to be very clear about this. So root means here in Linux and in Linux. So please remember in Linux, administrator name is root. That name you cannot change. 1 minute, I'm getting a call. Just one second. Yes, please. So yes, so you have to remember that the administrator name in Linux is root. That name you cannot change. But here the slash means what? Slash is called what? Root directory. When we say only root means it is an administrator. When we say slash, then slash is a directory. Which directory? Main directory, which contain Linux OS. So slash is the main directory which contain Linux OS. And this is the most important directory because all the directories are derived from the root directory. So whenever I'm using root directory means you have to understand slash. Whenever we say root, you have to understand we are talking about administrator. So these are the subdirectories. So one of the important subdirectories slash root. Slash root is the home directory of the root user. So whenever root user creates any data, where it will be stored, or whenever root user login, by default it will log into which location? Slash root. So root user created data will be stored where? In slash root. Whereas the slash home is the home directory for all users. So all users data will be stored where? In slash home. Okay. Before I proceed, I'll just like to know, because the time is over. So today I could not able to log in time because at my home there was power supply was not there. So that's why I log in little bit late. But now it's already 10:45. So shall I continue or shall we continue this tomorrow? Each and every directory we have to discuss in detail. So shall we discuss this tomorrow? Okay. So what will be the convenient time for you? 9:30 or 10 o'clock, all of you? 9:30 is better or 10 o'clock is better? Yes. Suggest me 10 or 9:30 for maximum people. You can unmute your mic because the session is completed. So you tell me. I have no problem. I have no problem to keep it 9:30 or 10. From my side, there is no problem. Majority of the people, what you feel, will keep that time. Somebody says 9:30. So a person who said 9:30, will it be convenient for you if it is 10 o'clock? Because most of the people are saying 10. Can I see your message? Yes, will it be fine for everybody 10 o'clock so that I can? Yes, class duration will be 1 hour. Yes, tell me. So shall we keep it 9:30 or 10 o'clock so that I should inform it? 9:30 also no problem, 10 o'clock also no problem. So is it fine for everybody 10 o'clock? 10 o'clock is fine for everybody, please tell me. Okay, so shall we have then tomorrow onwards the session at 10 instead of 9:30? Okay. Okay, fine. So did you understood today's session, everyone? You can unmute your mic also, and if you have any questions or any doubt, you please can tell me. So these recording sessions will be there in our YouTube also, and you will get the link also. So I think within few days you have to make the payment. Then after that, every day recording will be sent to your mail ID through one drive, Google Drive. They'll create and they'll send you the link.
Hi Suneel,
So
seriously this
before,
side.
yes, tell me.
Sir, I just want to know the course content and could you please give basic idea of shell scripting in this course?
See here, once you understand the Linux structure,
Mhm.
that same thing they will teach you in the shell scripting. They'll just write one program, one or two programs. Nobody is teaching you, as far I know, in Hyderabad shell scripting. Just they are telling 1 week something. In that 3 days, they'll teach only Linux. Now, I think yesterday you were not there, so I gone through the topics which will be discussed. See here, as for this course, I told them these are the overall topic. So can you just go through our yesterday's recording also?
Sure,
Thus,
sir.
you will find.
Sure.
See here, I'll just give the overview here. So here we'll be discussing the all basics. We'll start from basics. So you can easily cover up to maximum 3 years experience also with this course. So much depth will be teaching. So basic things like today we have discussed structure. Tomorrow I'll again tell you where exactly what data will be stored. Then we will do the installation. Then basic commands like how to create file, folder, copy them, renaming, what is called absolute path, what is called relative path. Yes, we'll be discussing how to create partition in disk management, booting process, run level, how we can create the users group, how we can prevent the user from wasting the server hard disk by applying disk quota. I'm just telling you in detail. I explained yesterday in the first session. We'll be applying 3 types of permission policy: basic file permission, access control list, advanced file permission. Advanced file permission also 3 policies are there. All the 3 policies we'll be discussing in advanced file
That's
also.
and something like that, right?
Set UID, set GID. Yes, yes, you are saying something.
No, no, no.
Uh, then we will discuss the to improve the system performance. Swap is there in Windows. Paging concept is there. How to monitor our servers with the help of the top command and process status. We can check with the process command. Then we will be discussing how to install the application using RPM and yum by configuring the yum server. How we can resize our multiple hard disk. So for that we have a concept called LVM. So using the LVM we can combine multiple partition and multiple hard disks into a single storage space through which we can do the resizing. Then how we can implement the RAID level 0, 1, 5, that we will be discussing. How to take the backup using dump command, tar command, how to compress the data, then how we can scheduling the job using the cron tab and AT. Both these command will be discussing. And in the last, we'll be discussing how to configure basic 7 to 9 servers, like telnet service, how to access the remote machine with telnet, with SSH, and how to copy data from one machine to another using SCP, how to configure FTP server, NFS server, Samba server, very important, through which we can do the sharing from Linux to Windows, Windows to Linux. Then DNS server, how to configure, which will resolve name into IP, how to host the website using Apache web server, how we can configure DHCP server through which IP will be allocated to our client. So these are the overall total content which will be discussed in 30 to 32 days. We will
Okay.
have even sessions most of the time on Saturday also. Only on Sundays we will not have the sessions.
Yeah. So do you have one session on Splunk, like Linux to Splunk configuration and something?
Which one?
Linux to Splunk configuration.
No, no,
Splunk.
no,
Okay.
no, no. What is that?
Splunk is a monitoring tool.
No.
Logs
Achha.
where.
Nagios mostly. Mostly people are using what? The Nagios monitoring tools.
Okay.
Yes. Apart from that, any other question, any other doubt?
Sir, course fee and duration, please.
Pardon?
Course fee.
Course fee will be about 6,000.
Duration is 30 days, 40 days.
30 days means maximum will complete in 30 to 34 days. 1 month. So depending upon if some topic is left, 2-3 days will extend. So you can say 30 to 35 days. That's what mentioned in the website also. But I'll be taking the sessions even on Saturday. In rare cases, will not take.
Thank you.
Yes. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any other doubt before I wind up the session? So it is fine to tomorrow onwards to have the session at 10 instead of 9:30. Okay. So tomorrow we'll have a session at 10 o'clock instead of 9:30. Yes. So you can also see the yesterday's recording who has joined for today. And before I wind up the session, do you have any questions or any doubts regarding today's session? I think for few days, same URL will be used for login. Acha, yesterday's class, I think on your YouTube also you can go. Or you contact our counselor, they will send you the link. Okay. Yes, anybody, any question before I close the session? So then can I close this session? Okay. So see you tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. I'm closing this session.